Hello, everyone. This is Travis J. Vernon, and welcome to today's podcast. It's been an interesting week. I've been working on flipping a retail store and redesigning it to improve the flow, to improve the customer experience, and just create the ambiance as you walk in, that it's a place that you want to be. Sometimes doing those kinds of things is difficult for me because in my brain, I can see it. I can see all the different dominoes and how things need to fall to make it become what I want it to become. But it's never set in stone. I may see something in my mind's eye and change it, and once it's completed, it won't really be the way I envisioned it, and I'll make another change. And sometimes in my previous work, I would have employees that would get frustrated with me about this thing because they would work really hard to make it the way that I had explained to them. And then I would change it, and then we would do it again, sometimes 2 or 3 times. And I know that that can be frustrating for people. But when I was working for a big box retail company, I had a regional manager come into my store and had explained to me that we had read the planogram wrong and that we had built my side of the store as a right-facing store, and it should have been built as a left-facing store. So every aisle was flip-flopped. And I told him that wasn't correct, that we built it based off of the right-facing store because we were a right-facing store. At which point he smiled and said, I needed just to get it done. I've lived my entire life as a military brat. I've been taught that it's okay to stand up and say, no, I disagree. I think this is how we should do it. But when your commanding officer then says, I appreciate your comment, or I don't appreciate your comment, and we're going to do it this way, that's okay. You've said your piece, and now you follow orders. So that's what I did in that situation. I flipped the aisle that he was talking about. So we had spent days setting up an aisle. Small items, heavy items, the heights, the shelves, everything. Took down all the labels, put new labels up, got the entire aisle set up. Now I'm talking about a big box retail store. So this aisle was 50 yards long. It was giant. It takes a few days, we get it flipped, and the store manager walks up to me. He says, Travis, I hate to do this to you, but the district manager just called. He said that you were right and to flip it back. Now at that point, all I could do was smile, laughing on the inside. It was a nice feeling knowing that I was correct, but at the same time I was dreading walking back to my crew and explaining to them that we had to do it again. Essentially, we wasted 2 weeks of people's work. So I walked back to the crew, told them, 2 of them were on the verge of quitting. And that's when I had the epiphany, what difference does it make? My staff was paid by the hour. If you were told to move a pile of rocks from one side of your yard to the other side of the yard, and then move it back again, and then move it back again, and you're getting paid, what difference does it make? Now, I don't like doing things multiple times, especially in the retail world. Every time you touch a product, you reduce the amount of margin that it's creating. Every time you have to re-merchandise, every time you have to ship something, every time you have to move it from one location to another, you've decreased the overall margin because you've had to spend more payroll hours moving it. And similar to what I said in a previous podcast, regardless of the situation, regardless of whether you like your manager or like your teacher or like whoever it is that's your boss, or that you dislike those people, there's always things to be learned. And in this situation, I did my very best as their manager to explain to them, mistakes get made. The higher up the chain the mistake is made, the more work for those down below, but they understand their mistake. They know they screwed up. It goes back to one of my absolute favorite videos or talks by General Schwarzkopf. So General Schwarzkopf at the time was commander-in-chief during the Gulf War, and he told a story about one of his mentors who was a general in the Army. And they needed to make a decision about the Army, and it was going to take the Army down one of 2 paths. And this had been going on for years. They were at a point 10 years down the road where no one had still made a decision, and they were in a massive meeting with a group of the highest ranking officials, and people had stacks and stacks of documents and complicated technical explanations on why the Army should go the one route or why the Army should go the other route. And this general just looked at them and said, "The answer is obvious, gentlemen." And then he gave them the answer that they were to take a specific route. And when this happened, Schwarzkopf was kind of freaking out. Like, there's no way his mentor, his leader, had read all this documentation, had gone through all these situations, what the possible outcomes could be. And he was a much lower ranked officer, but he still got the courage to ask his mentor. There is so much information here. There's so much to consider. No one's really going to know for sure. How the hell could you just make a decision like that? And the general replied, "This has been a decision that no one's been willing to make for 10 years. The best minds have been on it and they can't decide. So you know what? We need to pick one and do it. Decisions are power and I'm here to make them. That's what I'm in this position for. That's why I'm a leader." And Schwarzkopf responded, "But what if you're wrong?" And the general replied, "If I'm wrong, we'll find out quicker. And if I'm right, the job will be done." That stuck with me quite a bit. Schwarzkopf was famous for saying a lot of powerful things, and one of the things he talked about was paralysis by analysis, and that's what was occurring in this situation. There was 10 years of paralysis by analysis. Nothing had been done to move one direction or the other because there was too much analysis going on. And even though it was frustrating to flip that entire aisle of the store just to turn around and flip it back, when we flipped it back, everyone in that room knew that it was correct. Everyone knew from then on we were a right-handed store. So while yes, it cost us 2 weeks, it maybe saved even more time for other areas of the store not having to repeat the mistake that we had. Sometimes you have to trust that your staff can fix things even when you make a bad decision, that those around you are good enough, intelligent enough, capable enough. Even when you're faced with 2 poor decisions and you pick one, it may turn out even better in the end. Just have confidence in those around you. One of the big box companies I worked for had a system where they had a way of removing people in kind of a roundabout manner, where they didn't want to go through the problems of trying to fire someone because they just were doing enough at their position to get by. They weren't performing poorly enough to be fired, but they weren't performing well enough to advance. And they'd use a method that we called promote to fail. If you had one of those people that was just a hanger-on, they did just barely enough, you promoted them. Now, one of two things would happen. Either that increase in authority and pay and position would motivate that person to be better, to be challenged, because maybe that was what we weren't doing enough of. We perhaps weren't challenging that person enough and giving them enough responsibility to succeed in ways that we didn't know that they were capable of. And some of those people would rise to the top and be some of the best managers that we ever trained. And if they didn't, they would usually fail miserably. And it was at that point very easy to fire that person. Now, promoting to failure works in some situations. I don't think it works in all. But there have been a few times that I've been very surprised with how much someone has stepped up and succeeded when given more responsibility. So while I've been flipping the store, one of my friends who works with me has a 9-month-old baby, little baby boy. And this friend of mine is pretty bummed with the direction that the world is taking right now. And he's made a couple comments that he hopes there's going to be a world left for his son to grow up in. And maybe that's a feeling that all parents feel at some point. They're bringing a child onto the earth when it's not the way they remembered it. And I sat there for a minute thinking about it. And I just looked at him and I said, I think you have to have a little bit more hope than that. There is a lot of good on this world. There are amazing people. There are amazing places. There are great countries and great leaders. And whether you approve or disapprove of whichever leader is leading at the time, there can be good come out of it. I feel so bad for all these keyboard warriors and these protesters and all these people. And if you've listened to my podcast before, you know I'm not a political person. I don't like any political party. But hurting others and screaming louder and posting memes and being angry on your keyboard on social media doesn't change anything. It makes you angry and frustrated, and it steals your hope. If you want the world to change, be the change. Run for office. Control what you can control. If you want to make your vote count, make your vote count. Or become that person that people can vote for so their vote will count. But you can't just live in a society of woe is me, the sky is falling. Change what you can change and have hope. Now, the quote is attributed to Martin Luther King Jr., that we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. There may be things in life that don't go your way. You may be angry with whatever president is in power at the time. That person may not align with your beliefs, but you can still have infinite hope in both the future and in the current situation. I wasted a lot of my life thinking that when certain things would happen, I would be happy, I would be better. I used to think that once I got into high school, life would be great, everything would be better. Then once I got my driver's license, everything would be great, everything would be better. Then once I graduated from high school, everything would be great, everything would be better. Once I got to college, once I graduated from college, once I got a good job, once I bought my first house, you get into a cycle of thinking you won't be happy unless certain things occur. And that's not healthy. It's not healthy for you. Be happy with where you are and what you're doing. Have hope for the future and do things to change. Do things to change your future to even be better. But never think for a moment that you're going to be happier when certain things happen. Be happy now. Find the little joys in life now. Wake up early and watch the sunrise. Watch the sunset. Watch the moon come up over the ocean or the mountains. Albert Einstein said, learn from yesterday, live for today, and hope for tomorrow. The important thing is not to stop questioning. Another quote from Martin Luther King, but I know somehow that only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. What a truth that is. I'm kind of a nerd as far as the genres of books and movies and things I like. I listen to so many books, but I go back and forth. I listen to things about hunting and fishing, camping, all the hobbies that I enjoy, and then I'll listen to biographies and autobiographies and about people in the history and past, Shackleton's endurance and Daniel Boone and Kit Carson and Jim Bridger and just the people that I find inspiring to me. You know, the book Churchill was outstanding. Slow in places. It took a long time to get through. It was a long book, but it was fascinating. But I always come back to science fiction fantasy for my escapes. And Lord of the Rings has always been one of my favorites, and there's so many good lines written by Tolkien. The conversation where Frodo and Gandalf were speaking, and Frodo said, I wish the ring had never come to me. I wish none of this had happened. And Gandalf replied, so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. All you can do is decide what to do with the time that is given to you. If you want to go fish, go fish. If you want to have hope for the future of your son, have hope for the future of your son and show him the stars even when it's dark. There is so much good. There are so many good people. Find the good, be the good, and get out there and live your stories.